conversation. Cool conversation. Cool conversation.
Da, 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 da. Bring me all your dreams, you dreamers, you dreamers. Bring me all your dreams, you dreamers. Bring me all your dreams, you dreamers, you dreamers. Bring me all your dreams, Macumba bebe, macumbe, macumbaba, macumbe, macumba bebe, macumbe, macumbaba, macumba bebe, macumba bebe, macumba bebe, macumbaba, macumba bebe, macumba bebe. That can stay. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Cool Conversations. I am your host, Maxine Johns, aka Miss Hennessy. You are tuned into Miss Hennessy TV right here on YouTube. Welcome to the show. To introduce this incredible human being is one could be lost for words because he is so incredibly multi-talented, multi-disciplined, multi-fabulous. He is just a host of experiences is what we've landed on. He's a creative curator of everything that is symphonic, I would say, in this one. He's
Wow.
my darling friend, Andrew Bukenya. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome, my dear.
Thank you, my sweetheart. Yeah. How'd I follow that?
You are
I
symphonic.
think I'll put on a hat because I wear so many.
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. But you look fabulous regardless, sans hat or a beanie or whatever fabulous flair that you often find yourself in. But it's so lovely to be able to actually get some time and space with you because you've been
Mm.
so busy with just with life, but with your living your passions every day. Like as we were speaking beforehand,
Mm.
trying to pinpoint what it is that we do in this crazy life in entertainment. We don't want to be pigeonholed. None of us want.
Mm.
But when we
Mm.
have so much behind us, such a breadth of talent like you do, um, the mind boggles as to how does one introduce Andrew Bukenya. So people who know you will know have either seen you performing on stage, composing and curating incredible events, Sydney Festival, um, of course, just, not so recently, but in the last few
mm,
months, we've had that incredibly
mm,
successful Bark and Colour, which was
mm,
sold
mm,
out for both their performances.
mm, mm,
And you've garnered a legion of fans with that. But of course,
mm,
just your knowledge and the passion that you have, um, sort of working within the classical music orchestral world. Um, how would you best describe the life you live, Andrew?
mm. I think it's um, equal parts inquiring, curiosity, um, and joy.
Yes.
Trying to, not that I am joyous all the time, that far from it, but trying to find the joy in
Mhm.
uh, to fuel things that I think might be interesting for me to do, whether I'm sharing, singing, or teaching, or just sitting back and listening. I think, yeah. Does
Joy,
that make sense?
absolutely. And it's
Mm,
I'm glad you said joy, because even though we're not always in a joyous state, when I do see you, or when
mm,
you are, your friends and followers see you, there's always a
mm,
joyous aura around you.
mm,
It's what you exude, and it's almost effortless.
mm.
And I often marvel at that. I mean, I don't see you as much as I'd love to, but when I do see you, we're always in a musical environment where we're dancing
Yeah,
and hugging, and
yeah,
joyous sort of
yeah.
singing is involved. And usually you have a mic in hand and
I'm
some
like,
sort
there
of
you are.
encouragement of people for frivolity within the crowd. So joyous
Mm,
does follow you, even though you might not always think you're in a joyous state.
mm,
How how
mm,
how does that happen if it's you seem to embody this sort of lightness in a world that can be quite heavy at times. How do you
mm. That's a really good question. Um, I pretty much, if I'm asked to do something, then I've said yes for a reason, that I can bring something to it, or I can contribute in some way. So there's a reason to be, um, if not satisfied, then hopeful that I can bring something. Um, and then I remind myself of why I am about to do what I'm about to do. And sometimes that, like you said, that joy isn't, it's not always obvious. Maybe you're doing something which actually doesn't speak to that. It can be something that is borderline, maybe borderline traumatic. I think that is not just something unique to me. I think that is something um, that all creatives will experience. And that some of the best art comes out uh, of their not so joyful periods.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
um, so I think it comes of a place of being hopeful and being thankful that I can make myself heard a little bit, um, even whilst you know there are times that I'm not being heard. Because you never know who's watching, or you never know who you are inspiring, or who's inspiring you.
Absolutely. Um,
Mm,
you and I talk often about how we came to be in each other's lives, how
yeah,
we happened upon each other's lives, which is absolute kismet. And I know we'll get into that in a
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
I think it was that. I often think it's that, obviously a lot to do with destiny, but I think
Mm,
too, being in a joyous environment, uh,
mm,
where you're least likely to, you like, I mean, you're most likely to meet people when you're happy and you're in exciting
mm,
environments, but meeting special people, man, that doesn't happen often.
It
And
doesn't, and
in a
you
room
know,
of many others, over a loud din of noise to see the
yeah,
light.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that's how I would best describe how you and I have come into each other's lives. But I want to hold that thought because I did a bit of research on you, and I know you laughed at me earlier, and I
Yeah. Go ahead.
brilliant man, and what other interviews to see if I can find some little tidbits that I might not know. And I absolutely
Good.
loved this. I came upon this. It was one of I think a Sydney festival
Mm,
interview that they did on you, and the
mm,
question was, "Who is Andrew Bukenya?" And your response is, "Ugandan descended, English born, London raised and shaken, Japan stirred, Australian settled arts enthusiast."
mm,
Absolutely adored that because that is you in that intro, but there's so
mm,
much more to Andrew from that. But just reading all of that, the different cultures that have um, not so much attach themselves to you because you are an embodiment of a lot of those, but
mm,
I'm really fascinated with the Ugandan, the English, the London raised. I know you
Right.
before, but how did so born in Uganda and then
Well,
moved
actually, born in the UK.
born
So
in the
my brothers were born and raised in Uganda, and then my mum came over to follow my dad, and then I was born later in the UK while my brothers were still living in Uganda.
oh
So yeah, so that element, and because I've never actually been, is a very foreign yet innate element, you know,
so
to
you've
me.
actually been to Uganda because obviously
Mm.
the rest of the family there from there.
Yeah. Mm.
Wow.
Mm.
Is there do you still have family in Uganda that or is
Well,
there
my mum spends part of the year there now,
okay,
um, you know, because she has a house there
okay.
that she's built. Um, my life has taken on quite a few twists and turns,
Yeah,
which has meant that I've never actually had the chance to
right.
go.
Yeah.
And I'm still not sure yet
Mhm.
uh, it, how that might happen.
Yeah.
You know, it's yeah, there are a few things in that.
Yeah.
That said, um, I have a connection with people once I meet them, particularly from, yeah, well, obviously from the diaspora and from Africa and from
Yes.
East Africa. And there are things that just sort of run through you, and sometimes people bring them out of you as well. So,
Absolutely. And you know what? It's such a weighted conversation at times. When you've especially with a lot of us that are that have been born in other lands and then call a new
Mm,
land home. Some of us have
mm,
been lucky enough to live in many other lands, but we've never really lived in the land that bore us. Um,
mm,
and I think myself being South African, obviously I was
mm,
born and I lived in South Africa until I was 12, and then I moved to
mm,
Australia. And I've always identified with Australia being home because this is where I remember a lot of those sort of core memories, especially
mm,
that early teen. So much can go wrong at that stage of life, and so much
yeah.
did for me. I just trying to fit in and find who I was, but the memories of South Africa still burn quite deep
Mm,
in the
mm.
cognitive. This is
I imagine they would, yeah.
they do, but I find myself now, even with my children who are half American, they tend to relate more to the American side of life, and they forget that
Mm,
comes from a really important part of the world. So, like
mm,
yourself, there's no, I haven't been back to South Africa for many years before I
mm,
became a mum, and I am wanting to take my family back, but I don't know how to package that. I don't know
mm,
how to even make that sort of trip happen because it's such a
mm.
trip. It's such a big.
Mm. It's a huge thing. Um, it's weighted with so many things. I think also, listening to you talk about your kids is interesting. It doesn't surprise me how they relate perhaps more to the American side, because that side generates
Mm.
um, it generates, for better or worse, more kind of media presence in the world.
Yeah.
Um, you know, to the point that when people are like, "Wow, you're from England," so, oh yeah, well, yeah, there are black people in England. There have been since time immemorial, you know. Um, and if it wasn't for Bridgerton, I guess it,
Hello. Yeah, right?
you know,
Exactly.
yeah. So I get that.
Yeah,
I totally get it.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, so obviously, London is home. You travel back to the UK as often as you can, I can imagine.
Well, I I went back last year for the first time in about 7 years.
Okay, so not as often as we thought.
No, no, and even then, and it was only a brief visit.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and you know, having lived, been born and raised there, and then my education post there was sort of Japan based, and then moving here. There's quite a lot of distance, and I think that trip confirmed, mm, the fact that yeah, there there's still parts of me that are very rooted there. But as for living back there again, I'm not sure that would actually happen.
Wow. It's just I find I love the expat conversation, right? Because we are all expats from somewhere or other.
Mm,
We're all
mm,
immigrants from another land and
mm,
urge and make our homes wherever
mm.
we feel we need to be at this present time. And just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
again at your sort of journey, you've really traveled some distance. Um,
Mm,
but I'm fascinated with the Japanese component because I didn't realize that that's where you went
mm,
sort of like your tertiary
yeah.
where you sort of started it. So how did you end up in Japan, and how did Japan then catapult you to Australia?
Good question. Short story was that post university, when in England, when a lot of my music undergrad colleagues were going on to the Royal College or the Guildhall School of Music, all those places,
Yeah.
I'd only done music because I was interested in it as an academic discipline, and that it would get me out. I could study away from home,
Mm.
all of that. Not because I thought I was particularly talented. And then going on a youth choir world tour, I sort of thought, well, when you travel as a musician, you just travel as a musician. You don't necessarily get to live. And I was really keen to see if I could maybe learn another language, do other things. And so in my last year of uni, I did a teaching English seminar.
Wow.
It was part of my semester.
Mhm.
And then I applied for and got on what's called the JET program, which is where they take undergrads from Australia, from the UK, America, and
Wow.
you get a chance to go and teach as an assistant in a junior or a senior high school. Or if you've already got certain Japanese school skills by that time, you go and work in local government offices. So I got onto that program, which is a minimum of a year, maximum of 3. And I got selected, and I went to live in rural Japan for 3 years. So well, I ended up doing 3 years there.
Rural Japan as well, not even in the big city.
Yeah, no, that was before the big smoke. I did that first. So I was as far away from Tokyo as we are from, let's say, I'd like to say Perth, in as much as
My gosh,
it
and
felt like that. Yeah, but certainly, if not geographically,
yeah,
then certainly um, mentally and economically. Um, it was a complete 360 because from growing up and being raised in London
Yeah.
to living in a town where there was like one train maybe every hour and a half or so, and they stopped maybe about 8 o'clock, and the banks shut early um, on a weekday, maybe about 3 p.m. or something like that on Friday. And yeah, literally being the only foreigner in it felt more like a village actually, but for miles around. So that's how I first got there. And, I was plunked in there and I worked mainly in a junior high school as a team teacher. And then by the end of those 3 years, sort of various circumstances made me go, right, what I would really like to do is be in Tokyo.
Yeah.
And so I investigated, programs and scholarship programs. And so I ended up um, getting a Japanese, applying for and jumping through the hoops to get a Japanese government scholarship, which allowed me to study for like a year and a half at the Tokyo National University of Music and Fine Arts. Yeah.
What a journey. My goodness.
Mm,
How
yeah.
incredible. So then the decision to leave Tokyo, was that because your time was up and you were looking for another adventure, or was it sort of, it was a coincidental that it sort of merged with moving to Australia? How did the move to Sydney then occur?
Interesting question, actually. I think it occurred organically, and people thought, some of my friends in Tokyo, and one of my very dear African American friends in Tokyo, years before I moved, he'd say to me, "You're going to end up in Australia." And I said, "No, I'm not. No, I'm not." Yeah. But I think what happened was when I didn't go on to do the full master's program at my university, and I stayed in Tokyo, and eventually I was teaching part time, and then just being part of the gig economy and doing getting scouted and doing magazines and editorial and all that sort of stuff. And I met a girl who was Australian in Tokyo who invited me to come visit,
Oh, wow.
um, to come visit Sydney. And then I began to go
Yeah.
back and forth. Uh, I'd come over for Fashion Week, and then eventually I did put on my own concert with one of Australia's top artists. So I did a recital
Wow.
um, for the Mardi Gras Festival.
Yeah.
And then that was me sort of just backing myself, going, let's see what I might be able to, you know? And then, and it kind of got to a stage where I'd been working as a presenter on a TV program about Japan and Japanese culture. And that got shown on a network all over the world. It was NHK, which is basically, BBC level of, broadcasting, because it's a huge company, bureaus all over the world. And, I did this program, which threw me into Japanese culture and would get shown in 80 countries around the world. And, but there was like a cap where they were telling me, wow, we want to see you do this and this. But for whatever reason, I wasn't getting to do a music program, or I wasn't getting to do other things. And I wasn't having, I wouldn't say my personal life and my professional life were very aligned. They weren't sort of fulfilling. And Tokyo is a phenomenal place,
Oh,
and it moves at a, at a rate. Yeah? And there were lots of things I loved about it. But I felt also that if I wasn't getting my worth or getting what I was supposed to be doing, then I needed to be in a place where I could just breathe for a while
yeah.
and maybe not do anything, and just, you know, see what my life might be like.
Yeah.
And so it all happened, but I then had my lease was coming up, and I didn't want to renew it, but I didn't tell people. I thought I'm just going to go to Australia. A friend had a spare room available, so that's what I did.
And
Yeah,
you've been here ever since. So,
yeah.
how many years have you been here now?
That was the end of 2006. I moved here.
Oh wow! So you've done some time. You've
I've done some time in Australia.
done
Yes, I
some
have.
time.
Yeah.
And you know what? It shows that you have, because for people who have been following you for many years, whether it's been friends or colleagues, um,
Mm,
your your resume within the music world
mm,
speaks for itself. Now, I don't come from a sort of classical or orchestral music background.
mm,
Certainly, my friendship with you and seeing what you do in that world has opened up
mm.
my eyes to so many different colors within that world. I think
Oh,
for
I love that. I
yeah,
love that. Mm,
because you bring so much amazing color and sort of
mm.
light to things that if you're willing to engage in it, and I say this with anything, whether you're a hardcore hip hop fan, or you
Yeah,
love your 80s music and refuse to leave the 80s. I think if you
yeah.
invite people into those worlds, if they don't necessarily live in that, and you just
Mm,
help them experience it, the color
yeah,
that comes from it is amazing. And I was really, really bringing it back to how you and I met. Obviously,
yeah,
the R&B world, myself being in the
yeah.
world, I happened
But
to play
damn.
music that
Yeah.
Kenya loved. And you were at a gig that I was DJing at one night, and I think you
Was that in Marketplace, I think, when you used to
yes,
DJ there? Yes, it was. Yeah.
yes. And I don't know if you had come to, were you at Red Room one night perhaps, or maybe not? I
Well,
don't
that's what I was wondering.
Mm.
That I maybe had come, but not really connected there.
know, but I think you
But
heard the music.
I definitely heard of you. And then what kind of sealed the deal was Soulfest, wasn't
Soul Fest.
it?
It was
Mm.
the Soul Fest, a festival back in, what are we looking at here? 2000 and, was it 2014 or something like that?
Something like that, early teens. Yeah.
And then we bumped into each other at the Maxwell concert again in the aisle.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
remembered you yelling across the aisle, "I'm going to book you, young lady, for one of my nights." I think you did like a sold out.
Strictly soul. Strictly soul. Yeah.
And I went, "Absolutely, darling." And I gave you the card, and then that was the friendship from there, forever
Yeah.
fixated. But it was such a pleasure to be able to DJ for your events back then too,
Mm,
because again, it was color, it was light, it was just joyous, and
mm,
your love of music, outside of the just the world that you're sort of obviously embedded within.
mm,
God, you know good music. You love good music, and you know how to pick DJs to curate the night that
mm.
your followers wanted to, come and just dance with reckless abandon is how I would best.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Oh,
totally. And,
it
you
was
know, for me, I wanted to have my ladies on the decks, very much so, because, you know, in Australia, the way I saw it, and I would go to things by myself, and that's how I tested them. I would go to things, and it was mainly men behind the decks. Um, and so then there was this sort of testosterone-filled atmosphere, and I thought, yeah, nah, that's not it for me. I want to have these ladies who they just love what they and I can just say, take me on this journey, maybe feature a little bit of this and that, and then, you know, all killer, no filler, you know.
I love that.
That that's what I wanted.
Yeah.
And to be able to do them in a venue. which was not necessarily known for being R&B, like I gave it.
Yeah.
But to know that people would go, you're hosting it, because I'd personally go out, beat the streets, and invite people and go, hey, don't worry about bringing 10 people. Bring 2 or 3 people that love the music.
Yeah.
And that way we'll have ourselves apart. And because I wasn't trying to be a bemoth, I just, like some of the best chamber music concerts, I go to classical music concerts, it was that bringing of people and aiming to, you could come by yourself not knowing anybody.
Yeah.
And then leave having made 1 or 2 friends.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you have this way about yourself, sort of bringing together, like you said, people that might not really know each other, and at the end of the night, you're swapping numbers, and yeah, I'll see you at the next one, and so
And
that
across the age range, like, from 18 to 80, that's what I loved,
absolutely. But I think that's where the power lies within you, within everything that you're doing. So, obviously that was that's the world we met in, and that's often the
Mm.
world that we sometimes bump into each other.
Yeah.
Solar Sydney parties. The last one.
Yeah. Shout out to Sydney. Yeah.
Amazing. Shout out to that incredible tribe of people that, and I know,
Yeah.
you've been a part of that community for
Mm.
many years. They're just
Oh, yeah.
entertaining Sydney with just really feel good vibes. You
Yeah.
couldn't ask for anything better.
Yeah. Sam and Phil, just, the
Absolutely.
total boys.
Just
A
a
lot of fun. Yeah.
brilliant.
But what I liked with the things that I did was that I could then go, I want to make it about women that can come and play and know that they can play stuff that they might not normally get to play, or in a venue where they feel really safe to, to do it.
Well,
That was the
and I hope you get another one. Hope you can do another one at some point.
people have said,
If you're not changing the world that you're currently working within,
Mm,
it would always be down for another Andrew Bukenya experience somewhere along the
yeah.
line. But sort of bringing it back
Mm,
to what you're currently working on. So we've touched a
mm,
little bit on obviously the Sydney Festival, Bark in
mm,
Colour. Take us
mm,
through what that experience was like, because you were quite that was a massive sort of project for you, and I remember touching base with you just prior to it sort of launching, and lots of hours of work put into something like
mm,
that,
mm,
reimagining Bark, if you like. So, can you walk us
mm,
through what that experience was like for you, and what keeps you in this world of it's
mm.
classical music, isn't it, Andrew?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, well, look, obviously my undergrad and postgrad study were all classical music, right? And that's a big part of my music fascination and heritage. Um, Sydney Festival, I think, was always, where I was aiming for. And in fact, with the Soul of Sydney people, I remember being, I can't, I don't want to be disingenuous and claim sole credit, but I definitely remember being at a kind of, how you do those launch parties for
Yeah.
festivals before anything comes out, like months before. And I remember somebody saying, oh, we're thinking of maybe having this group, Soul of Sydney. Do you know that? I said, you have to book them, you have to work with these people, and you have to use them like this, right? And next minute, we had the party in Hyde Park,
Yeah.
right? And so, and then I always thought, well, I've already put on a recital in a country where I wasn't living at the time. And that was me putting my own resources in. I wonder if, I want to be in the Sydney Festival under my own name.
Yeah.
What does that look like? And then I started doing, presenting and hosting these nights at the Darlinghurst Theatre, which sadly has just gone into administration. And I'm hoping that a way can be found to preserve it, because it's just quite heartbreaking.
Mm.
But when I got to work, initially hosting these Thursday nights. Then Sydney Festival got in touch with them and said, "Oh, we really like the thing that you do, and we would love to host a supper club at Darling Fest." And the then artistic director, Amelia Harris, said, "Sure, but if you come here and host it, it has to be Andrew Bukenya. You know, that's it. Not under negotiation." Do you know what I mean? And it was the first time I really felt backed at that level. So therefore, I had a week of curating different music every night. You know, different acts ranging from the indie soul of Nancy Dennis to top flight young Sydney Symphony players, all in this one delicious week. So I got to do that a couple of times. It sold out the first week, and then the following year I did the same again. And when I was going to a SidFest kind of reception, I bumped into Olivia Ansell, who the CEO, and I said, "Well, I'd really like to do my own thing now." And she said, "Okay, well, we should talk about it." And so she eventually, after months of toing and froing, she said, "I'd love to hear your ideas." And one of them, I thought, well, maybe because I've been presenting other people and really wonderful artists. I had Chinese indigenous musics, and then I had jazz, and then, all this sort of stuff. I thought, well, how about me in a recital again, maybe with um, a lutenist or a guitarist or a Baroque, what we call a theorbo, which is an very early classical lute type instrument or guitar for bear, but with a really long, body. And yet, as much as I thought, well, that would be interesting, doing something intimate, because I don't have to do it for a big crowd. I would love, say, 50 or 100, or somewhere like the Utzon Room or something like that in the Opera House. But, and I put it down thinking, yeah, I could explore different musics and yada, yada. But then I was also struck by the idea of vocal ensembles, because a book that I had read years before centered around a mixed race family growing up in the 50s in America, and how the mother and father met on the steps of the Daughters of the Revolution. I think they were banning the African American singer Marian Anderson from singing on the steps, from singing inside Washington. So Eleanor Roosevelt helped her gain an audience because the Daughters of the Revolution didn't want Marian Anderson inside. So they put her on the steps, and this huge crowd of people, like massive crowd of people, came to hear her sing, like black, white, etc. Anyway, amidst this huge melange of people, this white gentleman and a black lady meet. They're both trying to get out, and they meet, fall in love, and they beget a family of 3 incredible children, gifted. One can sing phenomenally, one can play the piano, and one is sort of caught in between. And it's a story of their growing up into the 60s and beyond. It gets quite sad, actually. But one of the things that always struck me about this book in the time of their singing is that the family could not educate their kids at normal school. So they homeschooled them.
Yes.
And and they ended up excelling at the subjects. And as part of that, they would sit round the tables in the evening after dinner, and they would sing Renaissance madrigals. And they learnt about harmony and counterpoint, mathematical theorem and stuff. And I just thought, wow, they did all this part singing together. And I thought I would love to be able to do something a little bit like that. Initially, I was thinking maybe at Darlington, and maybe having, say, 4 to 6 singers.
Yes.
And at that stage, that's where it was. And so I pitched a couple of the ideas. So one was a vocal ensemble. So long answer to your question, but a vocal ensemble. And then one was sort of me doing something and then maybe somebody else. And Olivia came back and said, the ensemble idea sounds interesting. Go away and flesh it out and come back to me. So then the pressure was on. She's quite an amazing woman. And I knew, just like even with Strictly Soul, for me, it's all about, or a lot tends to happen with the title of something.
Yes.
If you know yourself, like Miss Hennessy Speaks, it could be as simple as that, but when you've got it, It cannot be anything.
That's it.
Even if you were to resurrect it, it would still be the same name.
Still the same energy.
Yeah. The same energy, might be filtered through a different lens, but we know what it's about, who is doing it.
Absolutely.
And I thought about what I wanted to do. What I wanted to do was share choral and ensemble music that I had grown up with and learnt to sing and share the joy of it, but through a different lens. Because, unless your kids are maybe singing with the Gondwana voices, the vocal ensembles in Australia, they are, because of the landscape of the country that we live in, they are led by particular people, and some are doing extraordinary work. Like Michelle Leonard, who does a lot of phenomenal work. I love this woman. In the community choirs, the Leichhardt Espresso Choir, and she goes to the outback and she does stuff there, right? And she's a wonderful woman. But there are no black or brown people leading ensembles.
Right.
And on, Classic FM, there is only one black person, which is the wonderful Stephanie Kanyandekwe, who is Rwandan Australian. She's absolutely brilliant and based in Melbourne. And, so classical music in this country is filtered through a very white lens.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to be able to go, look, there's some really fantastic music here. You really enjoy it. Why limit it? And I wanted to open that door a little bit wider. And so I just was umming and ahhing, and with titles, and then Bark in Color. And that was the thing. Olivia had said, we're going to do this week of music celebrating Bach. And I went into this Teams meeting with her and some of her colleagues, and I thought, mouth shut, ears open.
Yeah.
And when she was saying these things, I was just going, wow, wow, wow. She wanted to celebrate the genius of Bach in ways. And she'd mentioned a book that was on my list that I wanted to read. And so that kind of inspired me. But I thought, well, this week is going to include some of Australia's top ensembles. And then wonderful Benjamin Skepper, who is an incredible polymath and cellist and Japanese-Australian musician based mainly in Melbourne. And he does all these big, big projects. And so he was helping her to co-curate. And so I thought, what can I have as a title? I want to shine a light on what I am, without that being all that I am, because it is about Bach. That's that. And thought. And when Bach in Color, and I didn't want to do from Bach to Baccarat, because I've been there, done that. No disrespect to Baccarat. But I thought just something that I could really get behind and lift. And I want to be front and center. And when Bach in Color came, I just went, that's it. That's it. Because I wanted to look at what how Bach inspires me. His music is, music by its very nature is full of color,
Yes.
right? As you know, in South African and the music that your mother played you, and the rhythm and the dirt and all of that is there. And and we see it because now the whole Afro music is a billion-dollar industry now,
Absolute movement. Absolute.
right? Absolute. And so I then thought, okay, well, Bach is often referred to as like the father of music,
Yes.
right? And he's very weighty and academic. But I thought, okay, who influenced him? I wanted to look at, because I knew I had to go away and write a proposal for Olivia, and she would either go, yeah, nah. You know, there's only so much in the pot that can go around.
Yeah.
Um, and I thought, this is an opportunity to present, right? And I thought, who other people influenced him? Who was he influenced by? And who were the men and women who possibly influenced him? And who did he influence along the way to now? What are the things that speak to me in his music? In his music, it is his incredible harmonic sense and a rhythmic sense and a spiritual sense. And then I wanted to look at, so often, um, you know, black and brown musicians do not get featured. So what did that mean? It gave me a chance to really go down and explore some incredible composers. That and then go, surely there must have been some people before him, how can I get hold of their music without, and Stephanie was, down in Melbourne was very helpful with, what should I be trying to do with this project, And initially I thought, okay, I'll write a treatment. And I wrote a treatment. Then I went back and edited it again, and then submitted it to Olivia.
How long did you have to go away, flesh it out, and come back again?
I think maybe 2 or 3 weeks.
My God, so you had to do that. You sort of dug deep and
Mm,
all of those little arteries of
mm,
my goodness me. So you
mm,
landed then, obviously
mm,
back and forth with the treatment
mm,
and from that stage then to finally handing in what you were then going to perform. Were
mm.
you 1,000% sold on it when you handed it in for approval, or were you still tweaking before the first performance?
Oh, I was pretty much, um, and I hope that wasn't too long-winded an answer. I was just trying to give you an
You
idea about the
were
process of it.
absolutely,
You
because those are
the
things that
scale.
I don't think people really realize. When somebody's asked to create something out of, and it's not that bark is nothing, but it's bark, and
Mm,
you were creating a different perspective, a
mm,
black and brown lens for a
mm,
white audience. It was mostly a white audience that were watching this,
mm,
and
mm.
hopefully,
And also, how do you fit in a week where you have got the Brandenburg Orchestra or the Song Company or all what I said, the usual classical suspects?
yeah, it's a massive undertaking, Andrew. What a massive undertaking. So you needed to explain that because again, I don't think people who are not necessarily living within this sort of musical world understand
Mm,
what goes into the creation of something like this.
mm. No. And also at the time, yeah, so by the time I submitted it, to answer your question, I was really committed to the idea, loved it. I knew 100% that I would not be singing,
Okay.
um, pretty much by that stage.
Mhm.
Um, or did I? Or it might have been that it was only going to be a small ensemble of maybe, say, 6,
Mm.
possibly 8 singers. So that could have included me singing as well. but it was really going to be about the ensemble nature of things. And so I submitted it, and she came back and because she went, "Yep, I love the choir idea. You know, here it are some funds." And then that's when the fun and games started. Because I think one time you'd come to see me before, and I'd done a similar thing. That was the Spike Lee, you know,
I think that was at the the performance
Art Gallery, Vivid.
art gallery.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
amazing. And in that
yeah,
it's an incredible
yeah,
space. It was brilliant.
yeah. And so, um, putting the music together, I knew there were certain things. Well, I had to. Obviously, Bach was going to be at the
Mm.
center. But there were certain things that basically came to me where I went, well, maybe you might want to include this music and this music, and music which really excited.
Oh,
Okay, 3, 2, 1, back in the room.
uh,
Yes, so I wanted to include different music,
mm,
and but also I was very concerned about who I was putting on on that stage,
yeah,
and I wanted to see us on that stage in any way I could, which meant thinking outside the box in terms of singers that I knew, and also really stretching it. So from what seemed an initial okay budget, I can do this. As I started to garner more people, and I went from say having 6 people, then went to 8, then to 10, then to 12, then to and it ended up being 17 singers.
wow,
And the reason is there were singers that I want to include who had really good voices,
yes,
um, but they didn't necessarily do much classical music. They weren't complete foreign to it. Yeah, but I figured if I helped them through it, then we could do it.
yeah,
Um, the Bach in particular, the um, section of the motets that we did, they are very, very challenging pieces of music. And truth be told, we could have done with a bit more rehearsal. However, I wasn't going to let that stop me. Um, there were, singers that did a lot of, God, who did I have? I had Erin Clare, for example, who is really, she's a musical theatre powerhouse, you know. I loved her voice. And I said, I really want you to do this. And she was like, I'm okay. So, and then there was uh, another young Nigerian Australian singer um, who uh, I just met at Darlinghurst because she sang in the open, kind of the open mic section of the event that I did at Darlinghurst. And I heard her when I'd pretty much got people together and, thought, okay, I can't have any more. And then I had to go, oh God, but, you, Miss Zora, what a beautiful voice.
yeah,
You're just starting out and your voice needs to be heard. And then, somebody I also knew who was more active on the session scene was McLeet. Yeah, but she also is not completely unfamiliar with the classical world.
right,
Yeah, I wanted to see these faces. I wanted to see black and brown faces looking out at me in this multifaceted, dynamic, challenging repertoire. And also because some of those people, um, it was brought home to me after the end of the project, would not get a chance to make that music with somebody like me very often. One of my males wrote to me afterwards and just and he is mixed race, indigenous background, saying thank you for including me and letting us be seen. It was incredible that, so often we are not allowed, either on a subliminal level or whatever level. We do this incredible Western music, but we can't bring our full selves,
That's exactly right.
and I very much wanted that to happen. And so if that meant going way beyond what little budget I had, then I had to do it. There was just no way I couldn't.
And
Um,
it was only 2 performances that
mm,
that you had to put on, but
yeah.
was the pressure to sort of fill the room, was that, did you feel you had to do that because the space, was it a medium sort of size space that you had to work?
Well, it's quite a size. I mean, there's a couple of hundred that it's seated, I think, maybe 250, I think,
House.
300.
That's
Yeah.
right.
I felt that if I was allowed to be a part of that process
Mm.
and really drive it, then, because, the tickets weren't cheap, but I felt that if I could really be a part of that, then, people would feel invited and go, well, maybe I can't go to X, Y, and Z, but I really want to check that out,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that is what happened. So when you came, I think you came to the first one. That was
Um, yes, I think it was because then
yeah,
yeah, I think it
yeah,
was. It was the
mm.
first one, and I
And yeah,
I also think, not being from that world, but
mm,
not realizing what happens when you just allow it to introduce itself to you. And you have, again, like I said, such an incredible way of bringing people together,
mm,
regardless of music genre, regardless of culture creed.
mm,
The faces within those rooms, Andrew, was
mm,
just, it was transcendent. And I think it's what Sydney Festival, I think that's what their ethos really at the end of the day
mm,
wants to be, is
mm,
inclusive, sort of
mm,
people together, the diversity,
mm,
um, through music,
mm,
performance. It was something I'd never experienced before. And
And
to see your name on that flyer and to see you on a flyer, Andrew Bukenya presents. It was absolutely amazing.
oh, look, thank you, darling. I was adamant that I would put myself out there in a way that people would go, okay, we know him a little bit. So there is there's a sort of a trust there that
Yes.
I have. And I also was like, with Sydney Festival, you don't get to necessarily piggyback off me. I need to be able to go and spread my message genuinely. You're not just going to be doing a generic Instagram video, for example, or something like that. I need it to pop, and I need it to do these things because we're doing a couple of 100 years worth of music. They are putting their blood, sweat, and tears into learning a multi-dynamic, multilingual, multi-genre program from 17th century to 20th century, covering Portuguese, Latin, French, and German, and English. So, that's a big, big sound world. So the one thing that I can help with is just say, hey, come on, people, you will hear something that's going to blow your socks, you know?
And
You know?
and you did that, even, you know, obviously now hearing how you personally handpicked your singers and
Mm,
the intention for, why you wanted certain singers there. It's not just a show, right? There's feeling, there's emotion, there's reason, and there's intention behind
mm, mm,
that is created, and that you create. So with that now behind you, what is
mm.
Kenya working on next to present? What lies ahead for you in this world?
Good question. There's certainly a big period of reflection because one of the critiques that I got from that, um, which I thought was actually valid and invalid at the same time, and it was uh, sort of saying, well, certain things needed more polish, and I wonder how they would have sounded had Mr. X from the Brandenburg or Miss, any of those organizations, And I thought, well, you're missing the point. People have come that have not been exposed to this music before, and now they're coming back and saying, well, we want to go and listen to more. So whether I'm presenting soul or myself doing stuff solo, or I definitely love to do choral stuff. I think I proved myself at a certain point. I would like to be able to facilitate that in other ways. Let's see. Maybe, I've been quiet for a little while whilst I just take a chance to listen and see what's going on. Pre-concert talks for the major orchestras I'm quite passionate about because it gives me a chance to get in front of people and really engage with them. Say, what's your experience? That's really cool. How about this? Maybe on a bigger scale, I would love to do something similar, in cool venues around Sydney, whether it's 6 singers or 16. I believe there's a market for it, but I'm adamant that I cannot do it because I did. I got a certain amount of funding from Sydney Festival to do it, but then in order to have that number of people and to provide them with the things that would help them to learn unfamiliar music, I put a whole load of my own money into it as well, a lot. And, I can't afford to do that. I just, and it was really interesting. Two things which were really interesting were the little YouTube video that I did for Sydney Festival, which I thought would have, 500,000 views. And that's now like at 30,000 or something like that. That's been really eye-opening. And then, looking at other festivals, I thought, well, I looked at South by Southwest.
Wow.
And I was interested until I saw a disclaimer at the beginning, basically saying, we're not going to pay you.
Yeah.
If you do it. And I thought, I'm not that desperate to be in that festival.
Yeah, ain't nobody got time for that. No.
And I was like, are you kidding me? Are you really kidding me? Are we still doing that? No, I can't do that. So
It's a whole other animal, especially for performers. I think last year there was a couple of sort of younger creatives that I sort of came to know, and finding out how much money they had to pay to perform in the space.
Oh God, I could never. I was really shocked. So I think moving forward, creating spaces, creating things where I can be heard a little bit more. It might be a podcast, it might be something along that nature and building up an audience.
I think you'd be great at a podcast. Your voice. I don't believe we haven't even touched on the voice yet, but I think everybody's heard you talk so they can hear your voice. But I think a podcast would be brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah. Brilliant. I think, I would, having a little type of slot, maybe it begins online, but basically, a slot where I can bring what I did in Sydney Festival to people. And working with arts organizations that don't have people like me to get that message out of how that music can speak to people in lots of different ways. You asked me at the beginning of how you see yourself. And that's interesting because when it comes to sort of representation, on a professional level. You know, I've not picked up agency representation, and I think that's, because of some of the things that I've done, maybe they don't know. Rather than going, "Wow, we've got somebody who can do blah blah
Yeah.
blah," we don't quite know what to do. So it makes me go, right, I've got to go back to the drawing board a little bit. So the short answer is I don't know, but the long answer is maybe I'm open to seeing where it could go. You
Absolutely.
know?
I think you're in a
Um,
really wonderful, um, so slightly vulnerable space, which a lot of us have
mm,
been in at really precarious times in our careers, where
mm,
you're open to whatever the universe is wanting to send to you. And I think it's just probably being at the behest of that, which is it can be a little tricky, especially when you've got the passion, you've got the drive, you've got the vision, you've just created such an incredibly unique and original experience for so many people to have been able to have had the opportunity to sit and watch. And now you're in this reflective mode where really the world is your oyster, but it's whatever that next move is, you want that to be the right
mm,
for you. So,
mm,
I think anything that you're doing where you are utilizing that incredible voice, you've got the wisdom, you've got the breadth of knowledge. Nobody does what you do here. There is no
mm,
other Andrew Kenya. So I think
mm,
that's a power. That's a power right there. And not having agency representation is probably a power in itself as well, because
mm,
you are, the sort of like captain of your own ship. But it's also
mm,
scary too, because there is such a world of opportunity, and you want to make
mm,
sure that you are sort of living your best life, but also being authentic. Nothing worse
mm.
than disingenuous creative. There's so many of them that walk among us.
Yeah, and let me ask you. I know you're interviewing me, but first of all, what is a pivotal moment for you where you found yourself going, okay, maybe I could do this, and it was a bit daunting, but you took the step anyway.
Yeah, I think coming onto the online world for me, Andrew, because I've always been print media. I've always been,
Mm,
print journalism,
mm,
writing, even
mm.
not even blogging, but like literally typewriter.
Literally, yeah, yeah, type, yeah.
I
Mm,
love the smell of a library book. I'm that
yeah,
strange.
yeah, yeah. Like you're talking to somebody who still buys the paper on a Saturday because I
Thank
have
you.
to read reviews. And
So are each other's spirit humans, right? So
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
the world that we come from. So the online world was always such a vast open cavity for me that I didn't trust for a long time. But I knew that that's where this world that I
Was going.
am in was going, and I
Mm,
had to find a
mm,
way to accept it and accept myself in this space. I don't shy from speaking. I love
mm,
connecting with people, and of course on radio. Well, you're not
mm,
online; you're on radio. So
mm,
my voice was always something I was comfortable with, but it was
mm,
visual. What would I?
mm,
How would I present? The internet is an incredibly vacuous space as well, with not
mm,
the nicest people on there. So in
mm,
spaces, you read the comment section and it's enough to drive you insane. So I had all of that sort of back, sort of, noise. But I think COVID really kind
mm,
of pushed me out of that, because that's when a lot of people were starting to create these platforms.
mm, mm,
I couldn't go into the radio station to interview anymore. And
mm,
I miss this format. So
mm,
I just bit the bullet and started off slow, based it on my books that I'd obviously written. She's Empowered, and
mm,
packed it up with a little interview series, and just sort of softly launched myself into that. And here
mm,
we are. I've been in this space now. I think we're coming up 3 years. It's not monetized. It's not. I don't have hella likes on it, because I'm not in it for that. It's for the authentic.
mm,
And
mm, mm,
organically was really important to me, rather than rushing in and just wanting
mm,
to sort of, make bank
mm,
say. But at some point you start to look at those things, and that does
mm.
have to come into the factor. But
Definitely.
I'm still new to it. I'm still learning about
Mm.
it. But
Which is
Yeah.
that's not a bad place
Mm.
to be, you know, um, because you feel like, okay, I've managed to do this so far, so maybe is something that can be gained from it, you know.
I look,
Um,
I think so. I still am, really I'm still quite a novice at this. And I see
mm,
people
mm,
going on to TikTok and taking it to other levels. And, I'd
mm,
love to be able to, sort of get like a studio space and maybe get,
mm,
a cameraman and get out from
mm.
behind Zoom because I
Yeah, yeah.
being with the
Mm,
person and talking and that sort of
mm, mm,
tactile conversation. But it's been a great starting point for me, and that's when I really
mm,
silence all of the I want to. This is this
mm,
that I've kind of come to now, and with everything else I've got going on in my life as an educator and still
same.
writing my
Mm,
books. This space I've allowed a bit more of that creative flex. So
mm, mm, mm.
that is,
Yeah, you know. Um, what was interesting also for me with Bark in Colour was seeing some young faces and seeing old faces and seeing how, it impacted them in ways that I didn't first see. The Soul of Sydney boys came and they said, well, we had no idea this is what it was going to be. And it was profound, the effect of that level of music making and musicianship from those brilliant people on stage hit them in the solar plexus, you know?
absolutely. Whatever lies ahead for you, I know that you're going to turn it into gold because you always do. And take the time now, no matter what this reflective, phase is for you. You know that you're you hold the power in what it is that you're doing because there is nobody like you, and there's no
Mm,
space the way you do in this world.
mm,
Um, Whatever the next experience will be, there'll be
mm,
someone else that's going to follow that because everything you
mm.
do is with the purest of intention and authenticity. And I think that's what people who really know you, that's what they love about you. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, 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 no doubt about it. And um, thank you for saying that because it gives me hope that I am, you know, the one foot in front of the other is progressing in the direction that it should.
it always will. I can't wait to see the next flyer, the next, oh my gosh, walking in the city with the kids. Uncle Andrew's on another building over there. Look at that kids' legacy building. That's what we're doing. The boys love you. They absolutely do. They really, really love you.
Oh, I cannot wait to see them and find out what they're doing and listening to and um yeah, shamelessly igniting my own joy.
Absolutely, absolutely. Listen, my darling, we will cap it off there because we have so much we can talk about. But I just wanted
Yeah.
to give you your flowers and give you a chance to just share the incredible world that you inhabit that so many of us don't get to really get a
Mm.
peekhole into. And you're doing amazing things. And
Oh, thank you. I will leave it with you that, you know, when we did the bath, very early on in the process, Olivia said to me, oh, such and such has heard about what you're doing. And it was another arts partner.
mm,
And if you want, they're happy to help you with casting and production. And I just think about, what it's taken you to get your vision and Miss Hennessy out there and those things that you've managed to do by yourself, you know? Um, and when I got this offer, there was something like it was in the pit of my stomach. I didn't know what it was until I realized, like, after some long thought, you've been in this place before. And it's because probably what will happen is that entity will come in, maneuver you to the side, and before you know it, it becomes about them. And so those dreams you have for presenting people presenting people of color, that don't necessarily get that chance to sing in that way or before those audiences, will then go back to the drawing board and you'll be hardly anywhere to be seen. So, I'm so grateful, so thankful for the things you've said, because it could have gone another way. And so after much thought, I went back to them and said, thank you so much for that offer. But no, thank you.
You were able to, and I think this is again probably one of the hardest things that creatives, and especially solo creatives, when you don't,
Mm,
it's just power of one. You don't have a team.
mm,
It's just you and your vision. You hope that
mm,
however you execute it, it's going to land. And
mm,
probably the only people or the only person that you ever end up upsetting is yourself because of that.
mm, mm,
But I think the bravest thing we can ever do is to really not doubt ourselves when our backs are up against a wall, like especially with something.
mm,
I've never had to curate something as massive as that for
mm.
the entire like a festival as weighted as
Yeah, it was huge. It was really easily the biggest thing I'd ever done, you
absolutely
know.
massive. So I
Um,
to you, but I think like that there's something to do with that inner voice that we just need to trust it a lot more. And I know even for myself there's a lot of things I've done and I've stopped and started. We spoke
mm,
about it before we
mm,
to this officially,
mm,
just as a writer, it's the most vulnerable job in the world is to write.
mm,
I don't write about myself, I write
mm,
about others. So
mm,
to make sure that the narrative is is truthful to the to whose story I'm telling is
mhm,
it exceeds my own, because to me I go,
mm,
you know I'm
mm,
the person that's presenting this, but
mm.
to tell somebody else's story, there's so much, not only honor in that, but so much pressure to get it right,
Yeah, to get it right.
to get it.
Mm,
So it's the same as
mm,
presenting art, you know
mm,
music. It's legendary composer's music through a different
mm.
lens. Pressure.
Yeah,
Who's that?
but also the African American composers or black composers and brown composers that, you know, after Black Lives Matter, there was a brief period of heat and then it died down. And so you're just trying to keep flames going.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you will
Uh,
continue, and I'm very excited for whatever happens next, because we'll be in the audience.
yeah. Thank
Always.
you, darling.
Thank you so much for your time tonight, and just for always just
Thank
your love.
you.
So much appreciated.
Thank you, sweetheart.
Take
Good
care.
night to you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.